Today in TLC Live, the economy forecast. Are we in recession? Are we coming to do that? Or what is going on in the economy? Daniel Perez Liston, assistant professor of finance at the University of Houston, will be with us talking about that. Also, executive director of U.S. Mexico Chamber of Commerce and former vice president of Continental for Latin America, today United, he will give us the insight of what is going on with the airline industry these days. Good morning, TLC Live. Good morning, Orlando Sanchez.
Your voice sounds different.
Our voice today is sick. We are being sick for the last 3 days.
We've been ill.
We're being ill.
Not feeling well.
Not feeling well at all. Along with many people in Houston. I don't know what is going on, but I mean, sinus infection and so many things happening. Every time that I talk to somebody, it sounds like me. like a what do you say? Ill?
Ill.
Not sick.
Nothing a shot of whiskey won't take care of.
Oh, the shot of tequila I heard yesterday.
I don't know. But anyway, welcome to the program. Interesting day today. We have a lot to talk about with some experts. We began the morning, of course, with the big news that the Federal Aviation Administration had a collapse similar to Southwest Airlines. All takeoffs have been grounded. I don't know what the status is right now. And, this comes at the heels of a complete corporate meltdown by Southwest Airlines, where hundreds of thousands of American travelers were stranded across the country without luggage. No place to stay, no assistance from the airline. And of course, our transportation secretary is nowhere to be found. His comment this morning is to the President of the United States, who's in Mexico, says, we don't know what's going on. And of course, the media gives him a pass because he's the darling of the media, Mr. Buttigieg.
I'm wondering if our president, it will be somebody else. What will happen with the media? What will the media will say?
Yeah, well, the dangerous thing is, if you're and I think the ATC air traffic controllers in this country have done a fabulous job with what they've got. But the danger, Andrea, is, imagine you and your family at 38,000 feet at 565 miles an hour, and the system goes down. How do you navigate the traffic? Because if you go to FlightAware, you see there are literally thousands of aircraft over the airspace in the United States, and that's a very dangerous situation. And where's the media? Oh, they just report that we have a failure, but they don't get to the bottom of it. And so now I'll share my conspiracy theory. These constant Federal Aviation Administration disruption and airline disruptions are not technological, but instead it's an attack by the Chinese and the Russians.
I was talking,
and the American and the government won't admit it to us.
Yeah, we've been talking about this since the end of the year, that we see the crisis and the collapse on Southwest, and you have a dear friend that he was also a victim of that, and thousands of people around the country was victim of that. So we were talking off the air with our dear Pete Garcia, that is going to be with us in the program, about that, and he said, well, you can ask me about that, and we will see. We will see what he has to say about that. So do you want to start with Pete talking about that, and then we go to the economic forecast?
We can, because it's big on the news today, and if the professor has a few minutes to stand by, we'll go to Pete, and then we'll go to the professor.
Correct. Okay, well, welcome to TLC Live, Pete Garcia, friend of TLC, friend of us for many years, and friend of Houston, because we were just saying, like, everybody knows who is Pete Garcia. You just say that name and like, oh, of course, I know Pete Garcia. Who doesn't know Pete Garcia? So we are so honored to have you today. I know you're super busy, and you just give us a time today to be on TLC. Well, Pete, not only welcome, but tell us about what is going on with the airline businesses these days, the technology, and we just saw the crisis happening on Southwest at the end of the year, and now today around the country again happening with technology.
Good morning. Good morning, Andrea and Orlando. Glad to be with you this morning. Let me just start by saying this is not just the United States issue. This is a global issue, and it's something that has been foreseen for many years. One, you're looking at a traffic system, an air traffic system. We were talking about as Orlando mentioned, air traffic controllers. These are highways in the sky that were built in the 60s. And today they're still the same. Imagine having the same freeways in Houston that were built in the 60s with nothing done to them since then. So it's been a failure on our part, in the United States in particular, of not updating our air traffic control system. We have to build new highways in the sky, new places, alternative routes for airlines to fly. That's one of the issues. But there's some other issues that are facing us right now. You're looking at a whole new workforce, not completely, but a majority. During the pandemic, a lot of employees retired, were given furloughs, let go. And you're looking at a lot of new employees that don't have the experience that the former employees had. And I'm not just talking about flight attendants and gate agents. I'm talking about in the back office, running the airline, running the systems, running the technology. All of these areas lost personnel. So as you basically retrain them, you're going to find that they're not quite as prepared as the former airline staffs was. That's one of the issues. But two, we're in an area of demand where we were pretty much not flying for a few years. We now all of a sudden want to go somewhere. We can't wait to get there. So airlines have been more full than they've been in the past, with fewer airplanes in the sky and fewer employees. So that's created a lot of, we saw it right at the beginning of the summer, where all airlines were seeing massive delays simply because they didn't have enough people working the key positions. With Southwest, though, it's a little bit different, a little bit more complicated. One, they had a very robust company culture. You know, they used the word love a lot. That's their symbol on Wall Street. But a lot of the new employees still haven't grasped that that culture. And you have an entire new management as well. You have a new CEO at Southwest that is trying to get there, hasn't gotten there yet, and he's working with a lot of new employees. Now, is technology an issue? I think so, both for the FAA as well as for airlines themselves. Southwest is probably invested not as much as they could have or should have. A lot of people are concerned, well, what, are these airlines investing, or are they just buying back shares? Well, that's happening as well. Should they be investing, or should they be buying back their own shares at this time? Well, there was a lot of money that the government gave out to the airlines in support of that, but we haven't seen it materialize yet. And it's not going to happen overnight. Even if they did start buying the equipment last year or year before, it's going to take a while before they get there. I'm going to give an example of a system that we bought at Continental years ago, over a dozen years ago. Spent $50 million on a system that would help in case an airline had a major weather threat. In the first incident that the airline had in Newark, $35 million was the loss. That $50 million investment paid itself in a matter of 2 or 3 weather disasters, simply because you have parked airplanes. Southwest does have an advantage over many other airlines in that they have one type of aircraft, the 737, different models, but 737. They don't have Airbuses. They don't have other types of airplanes to fly. So their pilots can fly any kind of airplane that Southwest has. Their flight attendants can work any flight, and their mechanics can also work on any flight. So that is a benefit that Southwest has that doesn't seem to materialize. If you look at other airlines where they have 3 or 4 different kind of airlines, you can't have an Airbus pilot flying a Boeing airplane. So their situation should be worse than Southwest. The difference is that Southwest has a business model of linear flying, meaning they fly point to point. They go Houston to Dallas to Albuquerque to Los Angeles, back to Houston. Whereas a hub system really is easier to re-coordinate your airplane, your pilots, and your flight attendants. That's the key thing in getting an airline back on track when you have a weather disaster. Like for example, the FAA hold today. That's going to be for hours. All of those people that were on flights that didn't leave this morning for that 2 or 3 hours, they now have to go on the next flight and the next flight, and it gets pushed back and back. So this delay is going to be all day and even into tomorrow for pretty much all of the airlines. But a hub and system does give you the benefit. Hub and spoke system, meaning you fly to Houston and back to Dallas, Houston and back to Dallas, or Houston and Denver, Houston and Denver. Those hub systems allow you to reposition your airplanes a lot, and your staff, because that's the key, is getting the right pilot, the right flight attendant with the right airplane. So those things have been working. That's why the other airlines did not see the same problems that Southwest had as dramatic, let's say, as Southwest has had. But this isn't the first Southwest issue. This happened earlier in the year where they were canceling and delaying a lot of the flights. Now, there were some issues going on with union negotiations, so some feel that might have been impacted. But I think it was there's really usually not one answer or one solution. It's usually a complex, and you do have to go in and look and see what happened and how do you fix it. The government can't fix it for the airline, but the airlines have to do their own part. I will say that. And that's what will benefit the flying public, is airlines investing in their system, investing in their employees as well.
Well, let me just say this. On Christmas Eve, Southwest Airlines knew they were going to shut down Denver operations because they declared an operational emergency. They didn't have the courtesy to notify the flying public that Denver was going to be shut down and they should stay home with their families and enjoy Christmas. Instead, they let tens of thousands of families fly into Denver and then stranded them. And not only that, when they were at the Denver International Airport, they didn't tell them the truth. They kept telling them it was a shortage of flight attendants, they couldn't find ground crew, they couldn't find gate agents, they couldn't find pilots. None of that occurred. And to me, that's just corporate irresponsibility. And you're right, it's not the first time it's happened. It's happened to all airlines. And so the question is, the general customer service that we experienced back when you were with Continental Airlines and Gordon Bethune, those days are gone. It's all a bunch of excuses now. It's the technology, it's the Department of Transportation, it's the Federal Aviation Administration. And, the rest of the world does it, we're not alone. I mean, Americans are used to exceptional, performance. And we have this substandard performance now in the corporate world. You see it at a restaurant. You see it anywhere you go. Nobody cares. You get minimum service. Everything is automated. You don't talk to a human being. I understand the importance of, enhancing the bottom line for your shareholders, and you can eliminate a lot of, agents on the phone. But in a crisis situation, it seems to me they should have ramped up their customer service, and they didn't. That's just a complete failure, and that's unfortunate in my opinion. I still do think that there is some foreign interest intervening from a technology perspective into our Federal Aviation Administration. It's happened in the markets. As you know, the World Bank lost billions of dollars, and they're constantly infiltrating our grid with electricity, and no better way to disrupt the economy and communications in our country than to ground transportation. So that's my conspiracy theory, but thank you for your insight. And but what do you foresee for the industry in general in the next year or two?
Well, you mentioned something. I'll just tap on that just for a second. Cyber hacking is existing in every single industry. I mean, right here in Houston, St. Luke's was hacked a few months ago, and you couldn't make an appointment for weeks. So cybersecurity is a big issue today. Actually, I work with a company, and we're providing a product that's it's in the top 10 recommended by the FBI for cyber hacking. We're introducing it to the airline industry actually right now. But the theory of hacking and foreign interest in our country is happening. The government has acknowledged it to the degree that exists. Maybe they haven't been as truthful as they should have been, but even small businesses, they don't think that they can get hacked. They don't think, and they can very easily. So that is a matter of concern. going into the future in the airline industry, I think these are hard lessons that Southwest is learning right now, and they know that they're going to have to get better. Every airline knows that, and I think that as these new employees become better acquainted with the systems, and keep in mind too, we're dealing with a different public today. You didn't use in the day of Gordon Bethune. You didn't see people having fist fights on the airplanes. You didn't see them throwing the ticket counter computers at the agents. You didn't see the rage that you see today on the airplane, at the gates, passenger with passenger. It's not just the passenger with the airline employees, passenger with passenger. So that this culture that we're living today, that violence is okay, is disrupting any type of group, and it happens in. We saw it here in Houston at a local concert venue where people just didn't respect other people, and they just trampled all over them. Anytime you have a big group of people together and you don't have them respecting each other, road rage is more prominent now than ever. Why is this happening in our society? The pressures that built up from the pandemic, are people just under so much pressure because of inflation, because of the media, because of lack of good customer service? All of these things really do make our blood pressure boil. And I think those are things that affect not only the employees of the airline, but the passengers as well. So going into the future, I think we need to do a lot more on how to train our employees, just like we train the law enforcement, on how to disengage and re-engage and try to lower the temperature of the situation that you're dealing with. How do we handle the public better? How does the public learn how to handle each other better? I think is something that we need to start doing in our schools. I mean, for God's sake, a 6-year-old shooting a teacher. When did that happen before? No. And it's simply because what was going on in that child's mind that they were so upset that they had to go shoot the teacher. And it is not just children issue. This is an adult issue as well. And keep in mind, children learn from the adults. Mm-hmm. So it's up to us as adults to treat each other better, and I think teach our children to do the same thing. This thing of bullying on social media amongst kids is way out of control. Yeah. Parents need to do more. It can't be the teachers in charge of raising our children. Parents have to raise our children.
Yeah, that's for another full show completely what you're talking about. But you say something about pandemic, Pete, and we have a question from one of our viewers. He said, what impact may the COVID restrictions and vaccine mandates of having on the strength of the workforce for Southwest Airlines and through the aviation industry?
Oh, it's definitely affected the employees. I mean, the employees were expected to enforce the mask laws. Many airlines required and mandated that their employees be vaccinated, for good or for bad. The good I see is you're treating people. It's just like at the hospital. You want the person treating you to have some type of protection. A mask, yeah, my doctor opens up my heart. I'd like for him to have a mask on. I don't want to get his germs. And if there's COVID around, I definitely don't want to get it. So these things created pressures amongst us that we're still living today, even without the mask, even without the mandates. And keep in mind that for travel, international travel, you still have to know what each country is doing in terms of what are their requirements. Do I have to have proof of vaccination? What do I need to go into? Because it's evolving. It's changing every day. Thailand just had to issue a retraction on, yes, we are open for international travelers, when before they said, you know what, we're going to require that you bring all of your vaccination documentation with you before you can enter the country. And if you leave the country, depending on where you're going to next, you may have to have a different requirement. So these things create confusion, which create pressure amongst the airline staff as well as the traveling public.
Well, Pete, thank you for your time and thank you for the years of service in the community. And we want to wish you the very best. We'll help you come back soon to talk about other issues important to the Hispanic community because you're the chamber, the head of the chamber, and we want to talk about that, especially in light of the fact that the Biden administration has been in Mexico, and it's very important. That's one of our biggest trading partners, and from an aviation perspective, we have quite a few flights into Mexico, so we want to talk about that. But I guess we're going to move on over to the economy.
Yeah, I don't wanna dismiss Pete Garcia yet. I want him to give his comments after we talk to Professor Daniel. That way, because we're gonna talk about the economic forecast, but of course, Pete with his experience and also being part of many chamber of commerce. So I want also his insight about the local economy. So
Thank you.
Pete,
Thank you.
don't leave yet, and we're gonna go now with Professor Daniel Perez Liston. He's at the University of Houston, and he's also friend of TLC, and always give his time to us to explain and to our viewers to explain what is going on in the economy. We started the 2023 last year. Everybody was like talking about recession and we need to be careful what we spend, but we're seeing little by little after the pandemic, the restaurants are full, the hotels are packed, the airlines, as we just saw, people are traveling and still traveling, meaning that people are still spending money. You go to Galleria and you see lines waiting to get into the expensive stores, the one that has the biggest brands, that we didn't see that before the pandemic. I never recall going to a mall or going to anywhere in the country on those kind of stores and seeing a line of people, waiting to buy. And those people are not just in line just to check around and to see what is new. No, they're getting there to buy. So welcome to TLC, Daniel, and tell us what is the economy forecast for 2023. If it's really a reality that we're gonna get into a recession, or we are already in a recession, and or just explain to us.
Good morning, Andrea. Good morning, Orlando. Thank you for having me, Andrea. I hope you get better soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let me go ahead and backtrack just a little bit, but let me go ahead and give you a little bit of context of where we're coming from before I answer your question about 2023. But if you look at the 2008 Great Recession that we had, it was a very deep financial recession. Economic activity decreased considerably. We came out of that recession and we had like very low economic activity for a long period of time. Economic activity was low, GDP numbers were low, inflation was relatively low. We couldn't really get to 2%. And that's where we were coming from. And then COVID hit and economic activity decreased significantly. We had a very deep recession. The recession during COVID was very short-lived. It only lasted like 2 months, I think is what NBR timed it. But it was very deep. We lost roughly 22 million jobs. And we recovered very quickly from that. And it was like really an explosion of growth after that COVID recession. So we have an explosion of growth. Governments around the world, dumped a ton of money into their economies. Here in the United States, the Federal Reserve pumped an enormous amount of money, lowered interest rates. The Congress, just pumped an insane amount of money into the economy. So what happened is that it generated an explosion of economic activity. So we had GDP numbers, or gross domestic product numbers, that were insane. That we saw gross domestic product numbers in the last 2 years that were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10%. Well, not 10%, but very close to 10% that we hadn't seen in decades. So we had an explosion of growth, which is what you mentioned right now when you introduced me, that we haven't seen in decades. And with that explosion of growth came an overheating of the economy. And when you have an overheating of the economy, you end up having a large amount of inflation, which is what we ended up seeing. So in the summer of 2022, around June, we ended up having an inflation that was close to 9% or 9%. And we ended up having a lot of pain with inflation. And in the U.S., we're not really accustomed to seeing inflation that is that high. So the Federal Reserve had to jump in and start taming inflation. So believe it or not, we ended up having an economy that is actually too strong or too overheated. So the Federal Reserve had to jump in and pump the brakes on the economy, cool down the economy, and that's what we're seeing right now. So in the last half of 2022, there was a lot of talk about a recession because the Federal Reserve jumped in very aggressively, increased interest rates, tried to cool the economy, and there was a lot of fear that we're going to run into a recession. If you remember the first half of 2022, we had actually negative GDP numbers, and then the second half of 22, we actually had positive GDP numbers. But there was a lot of fear that we're going to have a recession. The numbers have actually improved recently. For 2023, the outlook is actually much better now. If you listen to a lot of famous economists, they're actually very optimistic now about 2023. There's a lot of optimistic news coming out internationally. If you look at the European situation, there was a lot of worries that Europe was going to fall into a recession because of natural gas situation, because of the Ukraine war, and so on. Also, if you look at China and their zero COVID policy and the damage that was doing to the international economy, there was a lot of worry there. So the situation has changed dramatically around the world, and now people are much more optimistic about the world economy. So things have changed dramatically. But to answer your question, I think there is a lot of money going around, especially here in Houston. Like you mentioned, if you go to the Galleria, there's a lot of people buying, spending money in expensive stores. Restaurants are full. There's a lot of economic activity. And to answer your question, I think there's probably too much economic activity, and that's what the Federal Reserve is trying to do, is trying to calm down that excess economic activity.
I find that all very interesting with the lack of people working. We have low unemployment, about 3%, I understand. But I wonder how much of that is debt being put on credit cards. But here in Texas, it's particularly rough, Professor, as you know. In Texas, for those of us that drive diesel trucks, $5 a gallon for diesel, $5 for a dozen of eggs, and $75 for a piece of brisket. We can't tolerate that in Texas very much longer.
That's exactly right. We're not used to seeing inflation at 9 or 6 or 7% in this country. So the Federal Reserve has been very aggressive in trying to control inflation. So if you look at all the forecasts that economists have around the country, they believe that this year is the year that we're going to be able to tame inflation, and we should have inflation back to the 2 or 3% level, maybe 4% level by the end of the year. Because a lot of damage has been done to a lot of working families around the country, especially here in Texas. I read some estimates that the median family or the average family has been hurt around $400 a month because of this high inflation rate that we're seeing. In other words, it costs the average family $400 a month extra to cover their purchases because of this high inflation rate. So we can't have that anymore. In summer 2022, we had inflation at 9%. Right now, the last measure of inflation was 7%. So it's coming down, but it doesn't come down at a quick enough rate. So
that's very interesting because, as you know, we're now moving into that phase where the massive number of baby boomers are retiring, and of course, we've had this zero interest rate environment for some time, meaning that retirement accounts, 401ks, equities in the market, those aren't paying anything. And at the same time, now we've got inflation, which means that the price of bread and meat and eggs and automobiles is increasing. So that's going to really pinch those people in retirement. And I'm assuming that that may level out and turn around. Otherwise, we're going to have a real problem for those that are retiring.
I think, long term, all that is going to correct. I think inflation is going to be under control in the next couple of years. But last year, for sure, for all these retirement accounts, it was a brutal year. Stocks were down, significantly last year. Bonds were down significantly last year. But in the long term, all that is going to correct. But at the same time, for working people, there were lots of jobs last year. People were working left and right, and wages increased, but wages did not increase at the rate that inflation increased, right? So real wages were actually down last year. So the main risk that we're seeing to the economy is inflation, and we just need to get that under control. And the risk that the Federal Reserve might put the economy in a recession, while it tries to control inflation, is something that is actually there, and everybody's worried about that. So economists usually like to talk about a hard landing when the Federal Reserve is trying to control inflation rates, and a soft landing. A hard landing meaning that the Federal Reserve puts the economy into a bad recession, and a soft landing meaning that the economy doesn't go into a recession. And right now, the soft landing scenario is looking more likely. If you look back 4 or 5 months ago, the hard landing was looking very likely because of all these international pressures that we're seeing. Now we're actually looking at a more likely soft landing scenario because of what I was mentioning about Europe and China and so on.
Professor, tell us, very simple for our viewers that are not experts in finance or economy. Give us the 5 top things that we can expect in 2023 and the 5 top things that people like, the regular families, worker families can do to face this situation that we're going to have in 2023.
Well, I think, if you live here in Houston, then I think you should be okay. The benefit of living here in Houston is that Houston has a very strong economy, and the forecast that we have here is that we're going to actually add jobs regardless of what the situation is. Whether we have a soft landing, hard landing, whatever the situation is, we're going to have a good economy here in Houston. And you don't have to be an economist to see this. Anywhere you go around Houston, you see jobs everywhere, construction everywhere, houses, bridges, everything is going up. There's construction everywhere. So if you're in Houston, you're in a very good location. If you're in Texas, you're in a very good location. So that's number one. Number two is inflation is going to be tamed this year. That's something that has been hurting families, a lot. It's been hurting families in terms of gasoline, food prices, and so on. So this year is going to be the year that we tame inflation. So that's a big benefit also for families. And then the other thing is that we might not end up in a recession. So that's also a good thing in terms of the U.S. But those are the 3 things that I'd like to mention.
I want to ask, how's consumer debt? In other words, credit card debt. What is that looking like, and have you looked at that?
Yeah, and I've looked at that, Orlando, and that's a very important point. During COVID, people weren't spending. They were, locked down. They were, saving all their money and everything. And now credit card debt has actually spiked. Like Andrea mentioned earlier, people are out there spending their money. They're going to stores. They're, spending left and right. And credit card debt has actually spiked. I think now it's at like $900 billion total. So I think people need to start to look at their credit card debt, need to get that under control. For some family members, or for some, family households, it's a little bit hard to get that under control because of inflation, like I mentioned. If it's hard for families to make ends meet, when inflation is so high, especially for those that are making less money. But try and get your credit card debt under control. Things that you can do to get your credit card debt under control is, try and, search for the best prices, go to stores that offer you the best prices, download apps that help you, budget your family, finances and so on. There's a lot of apps nowadays that you can download that can help you, budget yourself, like Mint and so on. So try and do that, and always, try and look at your monthly budget. Look at how much money you made and how much money you spent. Avoid spending money on things that are unnecessary and so on. But of course, just like anything in life, households that are making a lot of money have no problem, keeping, saving money. But households that aren't making that much money are having a hard time, making ends meet. So
let me ask quick, have you looked at the real estate market? Housing is a very big chunk of the budget of most Americans. What's the absorption rate, for example, in the apartment industry in Harris County or Houston? Are we doing good? Are real estate prices going to continue to increase, or do you see a decline? What's your prediction?
I haven't looked at the absorption rate, but I think the housing market here in the Houston area should hold, relatively well. The supply of housing is not as good as it was there isn't like an excess supply as there was in 2007 in the housing market. So we shouldn't see a collapse in prices as we did in 2007. Interest rates right now are much higher than they were, a year ago. Right now, the interest rate is close to 7% or 7% versus 3% or 2.8%, versus a year ago. But we won't see like a collapse in price. We might see like a moderate decline in prices, maybe 10%, 15%, but we won't see like these ridiculous drops in prices of 30, 40% like we did in 2008, 2007. The supply is just not there. There just isn't like an excess supply. And then when you combine that with the Texas phenomena, where there's just like this insane growth all over Texas, everywhere you look in Texas, in Dallas, Houston, Austin, San Antonio, even Rio Grande Valley, it's just like people are moving from all over the country to Texas. So I just don't forecast, like a big drop in real estate here in Texas.
I want to bring Pete Garcia on the topic because you were talking about like if we live in Houston, we're doing good. I mean that's the advantage of living in Houston and also in Texas. So I want to ask Pete Garcia about that because he's not only the executive director of the U.S. Mexico Chamber of Commerce, but he consults other Chamber of Commerce. So tell us about the inside of the business, not only in Houston, but around Texas, how the business owners are doing, what is their challenge that they're facing, and what is the things that they're expecting in 2023 in terms of businesses.
Well, thank you, Andrea. The fact is, every business is growing right now. Why? Because, as Daniel just mentioned, people are coming here. They're coming in droves. What we don't have is the preparation in terms of our infrastructure. Water pipes need to be increased because we have more population. Highways need to be improved because we have more population. But one of the things that, and I'd like to talk about is you were talking about credit card debt. Remember, but prior to the pandemic, people paid a lot of things with cash. And then now every company, pretty much on an airline, you cannot buy anything with a credit card or with cash. You have to go onto their app. And I think when they ran out of money out of the cash, they knew they had no more money. But now that they're putting on a credit card, it's a lot easier to go over that amount that you thought you had in the bank. But the banks love us. They're recording record profits right now in the banking industry simply because, so they want to drive debt up. That is the focus right now, is to drive debt up. Talking about gasoline prices earlier. Look at the record profits that every gas and fuel company made. Look at the Exxons, the Conoco, all of them. Record profits, pre-pandemic, during pandemic, and going forward. You talk about the cost of meat or the cost of bread or eggs. Look at the profit rates, the profit margins that have increased. The hotel industry, they're trying to make up for lost time. So when you have demand and you have people that have money, they can charge pretty much and get away with anything they want to in terms, there's a maximum, certainly at a certain level, competition drives that. But people are paying record airfares. Why? Airplanes are full. Why lower your price when there are more people that want to fly than you have seats for? Why turn people away at the hotels when you're full or drop the price? You don't need to. The same thing for the eggs. People have the money, they need the eggs, so jack up the price a little bit, even more than inflation. Just look at the profit margins of the major corporations that we have in the U.S., and it's not all, the price that we're paying is not all due to inflation. We call it inflation because, as Daniel just said, we had a whole bunch of cash, we start spending it, overspending it, that pumped up the economy so fast, We weren't ready for it. Now they got to slow it down. And
Yeah.
I think the profit margins will start coming down as well for some of these companies as well. But, the fuel is a whole other issue because it's really, the prices are based on a global market. It's what everybody's paying in the entire country, not just in the United States. But I think that our economy is going to survive. We've survived, future, past, and somebody mentioned the other day, it was a financial economist saying, we've been measuring and comparing over the last, since World War II. But if you go back further, go back to 1900 and look at the trends, inflation is not really that bad. Go to other countries, go to Argentina, where it's 80% inflation. People are buying bread today because they know the price is going to go up tomorrow. So they buy it today. Go to Central America, where you're seeing double-digit inflation rates. We're wondering why they're fleeing the country. And it's not just happening to us. Everywhere in the world, people are migrating to other countries, trying to find a better place to live, where the inflation is lower and they can afford to feed their children. So I think going forward, as Daniel said, I think we're on a good road here in Texas. We've got a great business partner in Mexico, our number one trade partner. And, what we're doing as a state, remember, we're friendly people. We're a very diverse community. People from all over the world want to come and live here, and the rest of the United States. So I think Texas is doing pretty good, just like Daniel said. The rest of the United States, probably not as good as we are.
Professor Liston, as we all know, President Biden has been in Mexico meeting with AMLO, the Mexican president, and he called him out. I don't know that the U.S. media gave it full coverage, but I know El País and several other Mexican newspapers covered it, in which they reminded President Biden of his comments in May, and that they were going to start paying more attention to Latin America. And Pete brings up an interesting point about economic migration. We have to understand that a lot of this migration and immigration issue that's putting a lot of pressure on our southern border are for economic reasons, are for safety reasons. Those reasons don't qualify for seeking entrance to the United States. That's what's considered an unauthorized entry. We don't grant people around the world because their economy's bad entry, whether it's a green card, a visa, or we're very cautious about that because we can only absorb so many people. But I think the point that I want to make is it probably would help the immigration situation if America did pay more attention to, when I say America, I should say the United States paid more attention to the Americas, our Western Hemisphere. And I've asked this question before. Wouldn't it benefit our hemisphere, our situation, our own economic interests to, lift the tide so all boats rise and create more commerce, more manufacturing, more economic opportunities? Whether it's in Argentina or Peru or, Nicaragua, Mexico's in great shape. I mean, I think the Mexican economy is doing well. I think they really got it going. But there are other Latin American countries that could use the investment. I don't think we've made the investment. How do you see that?
I totally agree with you. We have, as the United States, we have let China and other countries invest more in those countries. Why? Why are they investing in Latin America? Why do the Chinese, what do they care about the market in Belize, for example? And I'm just a very small country. Why are they investing it? They want the resources that these countries have. We have actually, over the years, have forgotten about our neighbors to the south when we should have been more focused on it. We were at one time seeking, trying to, erode the communism rule that existed in many countries, make it a more democratic system. Some of them are there. Nicaragua, fortunately, has reversed itself. Venezuela is another example. And that's why those people are coming here, because they're seeing the results of the dictatorships that are existing there that bring cause to what you just said. Safety issues, economic issues. The countries are being run into the ground. So they're going anywhere they possibly can. But if we start to invest more. Like one of the good things that the United States is doing with Mexico, one of the key ways to keep them from coming here illegally is to raise the level of the economy in that country so that they don't have to flee. If we can help them, the World Bank this year is putting in $700 million into Mexico to help small and medium-sized businesses. Why? They want to help the society normalize, and they're never going to erode poverty completely, but if they can minimize it, if they can go back to a middle class, let's say, that was starting to happen, I think if we invest in those countries, we will see the benefits. But we have to find out where we invest. We also have to find a secure way to invest, because we've seen a lot of our money go to a lot of countries in Latin America and be thrown away or stolen by the local government. There's a lot of corruption. So we've got to find a way around that. Just like we found with the PPP program, that so many companies abused it and were taking money that the government was doling out. When you dole out money, you have to have some way of protecting that money, ensure that money gets used for what it was purposed for. So we can help Latin America, we can help them in training, and we can help them financially, but socially is, I think, something that we need to focus on, is how do we make these countries more resilient where they don't have to leave their country. Look at Panama. We have very few Panamanians coming to anywhere in the United States. Why? They dollarized, they have a democratic system, and they're self-sufficient. They don't want to go anywhere else. They don't want to. On the contrary, Americans are moving to Panama because they find life very easy there, very affordable, and they use the dollar as their currency. So if we could imitate what Panama has done and try to improve other countries in doing a Panama type government system, I think they would not want to come here or not want to migrate to other countries.
Your thoughts, Professor?
I mean, it's a very difficult question, Orlando, because, one, it's a governance issue, by each of their governments. Some of these, governments in each one of these countries are very, very difficult. There's a lot of corruption, and they just don't do well by their people. But I think one way to help them is just kind of what we have with Mexico, right? I mean, you can tell the difference, pre-NAFTA and post-NAFTA, right? I mean, if you look at Mexico, just the level of prosperity after NAFTA was implemented is just amazing, right? I mean, in terms of like infrastructure, factories, in terms of like, people's education, their entire, just the way people live is just much better in Mexico after NAFTA was implemented. So, all these trade agreements make a significant difference in people's lives. And if people's lives are improved over there in their countries, then they're going to want to stay over there. So the United States, along with the governments over there, have to find a way to make sure that people are happy over there where they live. A lot of these migrants don't want to come over here. They come over here out of necessity and desperation. So, it's a sad situation, and it's a very difficult problem, very challenging situation.
Yeah, it is. I want to ask you one last question before we wrap up, because we're running out of time. The banking industry is very important in the United States and in a free, competitive market like ours. We were stress testing our banks after 2007. How do you see the banking industry? Yesterday, of course, Wells Fargo announced they're kind of throttling back out of the mortgage business. They've had their own share of problems, but are they well capitalized? Are they still doing stress tests? How do you see the banking industry in the United States? And is there enough competition? Are we getting too many big banks? Remember, that was Paulson was very concerned about that. The failures of these city banks and Chase and Bank of America, and the community banks are basically almost non-existent. I'm on the board of a community bank, and they serve a purpose, but I'm concerned that the banking industry is getting too big. How do you see the banking industry?
I mean, I think the banking industry for sure is too big, but I think the banking industry is robust for sure, and they did very well during the COVID crisis. There was like really no issues whatsoever. So I think the banking industry is fine. There's no problems with that. the stress test, the capitalization rates, all that is fine. I don't really see like any issues with the banking industry. The stuff that they did, the reforms that they passed in 2010, I think were very healthy for the financial sector. Like you mentioned, the banking industry is very unique, very different than all the other industries in the country. So I think what they did in 2010 was very healthy for the country, and we saw it in the COVID crisis. There was really no issues whatsoever.
Well, I think many in the banking industry are a little pleased that the interest rates are coming up. I mean, that kind of helps. It helps
can make a little bit of
Professor, we want to thank you very much, and congratulations to you, the university, my alma mater, because we're numero uno. The University of Houston Cougar basketball team is ranked #1 in the country, and we want to keep it that way. I'm assuming you're a basketball fan, or at least watch the Cougars, right?
I'm not much of a sports fan, to tell you the truth, Orlando. Sorry to disappoint you. There's some pictures there on my site. Some motorcycle pictures. I don't know if you can see them. I'm a motorcycle fanatic, so.
Oh, good. Well, maybe you can ride a Harley with me someday.
You do.
There we go.
All right. Well, we want to thank Professor Liston and Pete Garcia for taking the time out to be with us today, and I think Andrea will tell us what's coming up in the next week.
Well, thank you so much, Pete and Daniel. Gracias a los dos. De verdad que siempre los llamamos y están dispuestos y disponibles para nosotros y obviamente para la gente, explicarles estos complicados temas, para explicarlos en una forma más simple, para poder navegar lo que nos espera en el 2023. Así que gracias a los dos.
Gracias.
Muchas gracias por la oportunidad.
Well, I want also to keep promoting our Leadership Latino, because it's coming up at the end of January. It's January 27 and January 28. It's a campaign boot camp. For the first time, we're doing a boot camp just dedicated for people that want to run for office. And I want to emphasize that this is at no cost, meaning free, completely free. And also, if you're coming from out of Houston, because the bootcamp is going to be here in Houston, if you're coming from out of Houston, we're going to cover the accommodation, meaning the hotel, and also we're going to give you up to $200 for transportation. So if you want to travel, meaning like driving to Houston, so we're going to cover up to $200. And also, if you want to fly to Houston, I don't know what is the prices on the airline. We can check with.
According to Southwest Airlines, $49.
$49.
If they get off the ground.
If they get off the ground, exactly. So if you get lucky and if you get off the ground, so you will be in Houston, but we covered up to $200. So I want to make sure that you guys have that information, because it's very important. Sometimes people just go on the websites or go on the link and they don't pay attention to these details, and they say like, well, how much it costs, and we're getting phone calls and questions about that. Well, it's completely free. This is completely free, and also, we cover the accommodation, the hotel, if you're coming from out of Houston, and we covered up to $200 in transportation. So don't miss this opportunity. We want more leaders like you. We want more Latino leaders that are willing to run for office, represent our community. The last census 2020 is giving us that we are close to 50% of the population here in Houston, almost 50% of the population in Harris County, and very close to that number around Texas. So meaning that we need more Latino representations in the local governments. So that's why we're doing this bootcamp campaign, that you can take advantage and take this opportunity to move to the next level. And we're gonna guide you, navigate from A to Z from the moment that you register for the campaign, also how to raise money, also how to go to ethics and compliance, and then how to deal with media, how to speak in public. It's everything that you need to be not only a leader in your community, but also a politician and the voice for our community. So this is going to be Leadership Latino at the end of January. It's going to be here in Houston, 27 and 28. It's a Friday and Saturday. So take advantage of this big opportunity, Leadership Latino. Go to our website, TexasLatinoConservatives.com. You're going to find the link there, or you can go directly to LeadershipLatino.com. TexasLatinoConservative.com or LeadershipLatino.com. Also, if you go to Texas Latino Conservative and you don't want to run for office, but you want to support our cause, so donate or become a member. It's only $35 a year. $35 a year. That's pretty much nothing for everything that we're doing every single day with Texas Latino Conservatives from the moment that we start 3 years ago, even though that Orlando found this organization long time ago, but we're being very active the last 3 years.
I want to make an editorial comment. I've had a couple of questions come up. We have May elections coming up. There are a lot of municipalities across the state of Texas that run nonpartisan races. The city of Houston elections are coming up in November. And there are several candidates that may not be Republican, may not be Democrat, because our city races are nonpartisan, have asked me if they can participate. The answer is yes. And you don't have to be Latino. You don't have to be Hispanic. Anybody that wants to learn the campaign process, we're a nonprofit organization, so we welcome everyone. Even Democrats, if you're thinking about, running on a more conservative platform, you're certainly welcome to join us. Now, here's my editorial comment. A couple of weeks ago, LULAC, the League of United Latin American Cities, announced that they were going to sue the city of Houston because the city of Houston has 15 city council members and a mayor, or 17 city council mayors and council members and a mayor, and that there's only one Hispanic. My comment is this: LULAC would be better served by investing that money and getting out the vote of the Hispanic community, educating the Hispanic community on the importance of voting rather than going to courts. Courts cannot force Hispanics to vote. Courts cannot force people to vote. We created 2 opportunity districts for Hispanics when we redistricted, J and I, District J, for example, and we failed to elect a Hispanic. In 1995, when I was a city council member, was sworn in, we had Gracie Saenz, we had John Castillo, we had Felix Fraga, we had Gabriel Vasquez, we had Sylvia Garcia, we had myself. We had about a half a dozen Hispanics serving on the city of Houston. And what happened? Here it is 2023. We have no Hispanic participation. Courts cannot force that. So LULAC is better, oriented towards educating and encouraging the public, especially the Hispanic community, to go vote. So if you want to participate in our program, Leadership Latino, come join us. Andrea just gave you all the information, but lawsuits aren't going to fix the problem.
Okay. Go back to our website, TexasLatinoConservative.com and LeadershipLatino.com. But anyway, if you just go to TexasLatinoConservative.com, you're going to find the link of the Leadership Latino, all the information. And remember, it's a total no-cost, completely free boot camp campaign. For the first time, we're doing this boot camp campaign, especially for people that want to run for office. So take advantage of that, and that's going to be at the end of the month here in Houston, and we will provide with accommodation and transportation. So see you guys next Wednesday. Ciao, ciao.